Hey everybody, how's it going? I am going to be showing you guys how to create this cool little digital asset where we have a fence that we can actually kind of control and have some sort of ability to manipulate the way it looks and be able to add a little bit of randomness if we wanted to. Boom, boom, boom. So that way we get a whole different look and we can create this really, really fast. So we can get a whole bunch of variations of the way this fence might look. So let's say I like the way that was. I can go in and make another fence. And with this fence here, let's kind of move it over to the side so that we can see it a little bit better. And put it there, and then now that I have that fence there, I can go back to my settings, make adjustments as I see fit, add more spikes, and add some more randomness. And let's say I was happy with that, and then I can go back in and create more and more fences and whatnot. So let me clear up the scene and we will get started on how to create this little digital asset. Yeah, let's get started. Okay, to start off, I'm going to create a geometry node. And actually, let's go outside. Let's rename this fence. And to start off with, I'm going to get rid of all these nodes. I can bring them back later if I needed to. But yeah, for right now, I'm going to hide them. So I'm going to go here to the edit parameters interface. And we have these three folders, the transform, the render, and the miscellaneous folders. And with each one of these folders, they represent one of these tabs. So the folders have different types of settings that you can change for them. But for right now, what I'm going to do is select all of them and then make them invisible. I'm going to accept. And when I do that, you can see that it clears out everything in my properties panel for this node. And we'll start adding things in a little bit. Another thing that we're going to do, so let me give myself a little bit more space here. I'm going to show you if I create something. Let's create a box. I have the box here, but I don't get access to that other area if I want to go in and look at this property. I want to be able to access this these properties from the outside of the fence, and I also want to be able to access anything here so that way I can make this tool a little bit easier to use. So what I'm going to do to be able to do that is here on this drop down menu, you can tell it that you want to split right and left, so that way you have two tabs for the property, or two panels here. So once I've done that, I'm going to pin this node out here. Now if I go inside and I go into the box, you'll see that I have the properties for that box node there, and I don't have to worry about losing this selection, so I can keep on working on this as we go along. Okay, now that I have set that, let's adjust the size. Maybe in the Z I'll do 0.3 to start off with, and that looks pretty cool for a panel for the fence. Let's say for the height, which should be Y, we'll make it 5 to start off with, and then the width this way along the X, I think 1 is fine for now. So this is pretty cool. Let's give ourselves some properties to start working on this here. So to do that, we're going to go back into the edit parameters for the fence node. And And let's start off by creating a folder. And maybe I'll call this create fence. And I'll keep it as a tab like we had in the other defaults. So I'm going to click accept, and you'll see that I have this tab. It's the only tab, there's no content in there. Great. And now I'm going to create a float, and I want to be able to control on this one for this case the width and the height. So basically the X and the Y. Each one of those properties I'm going to create a float, which is basically a floating point number, so I can add decimals and things like that, which would be different from integers. Later on in the tutorial we will use some integers, but let's start off with the float, and we'll say this is going to be panel height. So this is the name that Houdini looks at in the background, but this is what the user will actually see. So panel height. Actually, is it really panel? Let's call it board. And this is going to be the board height. It's a float. Cool. Let's we can set other properties later if we need to, but right now I think that is fine. By default it's going to go to 0 to 10. So let's create another one, and this is going to be my board width, and call it board width. There we go. So let's accept, and we'll see that we have these two properties where we have sliders on there. Right now they're not connected to anything, but we'll make that connection right now. So with the board height, I'm going to right click and copy parameters. That's going to copy whatever's in the field here. And there's different ways we can actually paste this in here. So by default, we can just paste values, and that's just going to paste whatever is there. But what I want to do in this case is paste relative reference. So whenever I change this, this will change as well. So I'm going to do paste relative reference and push enter. And right now it's set to 0, and as I go it will adjust it more and more. So let's go to the parameter interface. Let's do the board height, and here you can see that it's added this information there, which is great. And unit size is 1, invisible. This is all good. I wanted to change, there we go, channels. Default is 0, and let's say by default we will make it 5 the way we had it, and apply, accept. So you can see that it goes to 5 there. So it's going to start off right at the middle, and I can adjust it either way. And if a user wanted to, they can type in any number in there and it will still work. One of the problems will be is if we do something like -5, it will flip it inside out, which is not good for what we want. So let's make that adjustment here too. We'll want to go in and select that panel here. We are in channels, we'll go back to parameter, and here with the lock, I'm going to lock the low bound, so that way the lowest we can make is 0. So I'm going to click accept. Now if I put something like -5, it will not let me, it will just go straight to 0. That's the smallest that it can have. Maybe the smallest we might want is like 0.1 or something like that. You can choose what you want for yours, but I'll let them go all the way down to 0 in this case. So now that I have done that, let's do those adjustments with the board width. I'm going to go into the parameter interface, board width, and inside of here I'm going to lock the low bound, and under channels I'm going to put the default at 1 and accept. There we go. I'm going to copy the parameters for the board width, and here in the X for the box I'm going to paste relative reference. Now let's test it out. Cool. We have it being adjusted. Oops. 1 and 5. There we go. Now that I have done that, let's change this from polygons to polygon mesh, so that way we have some more polygons to work with. On the Z, I just want 2, so that way we don't have extra polygons that we don't need. And I think everything else I'm going to keep right now the way it is. It will work exactly the way I want it to. And another thing I want to do is make sure that the fence is right on the ground. I want it to be at the origin, but I don't want it to be centered the way it is right now. So in order to make that change, I basically want to move it up half the height of this is. So the height is changing based off of this, but we can make a connection here within itself, so that way it makes that adjustment for us. Let's copy the parameter here in the size for the Y, and then in here let's paste a relative reference. And if we do that, you'll see that it moves it up twice as much as we want, but we can actually make this an expression. We can multiply it times 0.5. And when you do that, you can see that it goes right on the grid there. And as I make any changes, it will always stay there. Pretty awesome. Okay, so let's say we give this a name, fence box base, something like that, just so that I know what it is. We can see that it is a box node, but that we're giving it a name there. Now I want to be able to have this as a group. So I'm going to go in and create a group node. And in this group node, I want to make sure that I can, let's make that selection, and then we'll add that to the group. Oops. There we go. So you just have to select it, and in the viewport push enter. Now that I've done that, that selects face 19. That is great. And we're gonna say this is the peak group. And basically I want that grouped because I'm going to create a transform node, but I only want to move that one face. And the reason I'm creating it as a transform node is that I want to be able to control that attribute. I don't want it to be something that is not controllable. I want to have the user be able to modify that. So if I transform it right now, it's going to transform the whole thing. But what I can do is select that group. And it's group name, group 1. Let's call this fence peak. Group 1 is not valid because I changed the name. Let's go to fence peak. There we go. And now as I translate that, you'll see that it only moves that one face, and we can make it more or less spiky. Great. So I'm going to create another attribute for this. So let's go into edit parameters. And I like to be able to create these parameters as I go along, because sometimes I forget, hey, this is something that I can actually manipulate. So it's kind of nice to be able to do it as I go along so that I don't forget. Oops, I don't want to label. Let's discard that, and I want a float. Oh, sorry. It was just confusing because I was popping up on the channel. So I'm going to leave the peak at the default for 0. But here in the parameters, I can change the name. Let's make this board peak and board peak for the label. Board peak height. How about that? And we can do a range. And in this case, we can actually go negative maybe. Let's see how that looks. I haven't really thought about that, but I do want it to be a default of 0, so I'll leave that there, and let's accept. And then let's copy this parameter, and then we'll paste it here in the translate y. So paste relative reference. There we go. And now that I do that, I can go up, and let's see, 0.3, let's make that negative, what it looks like when it's negative. I don't know if that's a fence that somebody would like to make, but if I have a minimum of 0, that could be kind of a good block to go that way. And then if they needed to go negative, they could if they wanted to. I don't see why they would, but why limit it if it's not breaking our fence? So there we go. We have a little bit of a peak there with our fence. And if we want to, let's see, we can go in, and actually, yeah, I'm gonna put this over to the side here. I'm going to start creating a line because this is essentially the board for the fence that we're going to be creating. And once I've created this, I am going to want to create multiple versions of these. And the way I'm going to do that is by creating a line. So let's create a line right now. And this line, if we push W, we should see it down here. Let's make it visible here. So there is our line. Let's make this 10 units long. So that way we have some room to work with this. And it is going in the wrong direction. We are going straight up in the Y. Let's make it create on the Z plane. I mean, not the Z, sorry. The X. So let's put this to 0 and that to 1. So when we do that, we have the panel going across this way. So if we look at that, there we go. We have the board here, and we're going to be creating the board along this line. Okay, now that we have that, let's have this object be created onto this line. And what I want to do is create a copy. Let's do a copy stamp. And the first one we want to create the pyramid, connect the perimeters, and on the second one we're going to connect the line. When we look at it, we should get 2 copies of that post there now. Let me go off of wireframe so that you can see it a little bit clearer. And the cool thing about this is as I increase the number of points, we'll get more boards for our white picket fence. So I'm going to start off with that with 2, and this is going to be an attribute that we want to drive because we want them to have the ability to create more or less panels or boards here on the fence. So let's do that. Interface, create a float, and let's make this num of boards, and then number of boards. It is a float. I want to make sure that it's locked off at 2. That's going to be the minimum that we want them to have. Actually, let's, 2. And then just for the display, we'll leave it at 10, but not lock it to a maximum. Here on the defaults, let's make sure that is a minimum of 2. And let's accept that. I'm gonna copy that parameter, and in here, let's paste relative reference. Great. So now as we adjust this, we should get more boards. Perfect. That is really good for what we want now. Now the next thing that we are missing is the board that goes as a support. Also, if we wanted to, with each one of these, we can add a little bit of randomness. So let's say we wanted let's turn off transform cumulative and let's do rotate. Okay, so not on the Y, it is probably on the Z. Let's make sure. Yep. So I'm going to give it a little bit of randomness here before we do the boards on the back. And what this randomness will do is kind of give us a little bit of tilt on the boards. So that way they don't look super perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do is use a little bit of an expression, and basically with this we got the point numbers. So if we look at the line now and we can turn on point numbers here, you can see that each point is represented by a number. So we can actually use that information in here. Houdini has given us an actual like random, or not random, but variable to be able to access that. So I'm going to use a function and then randomize it and put it within a range. So the function I want to use is a fit 01. And what the fit01 will do is get a number and then make that number fit between a range that we define. So the first number is the number that is going to be the randomized number. So I'm going to use another function here. It's going to be rand. And then the variable we want to use is $pt. So that gives us a random number based off of the point number that is being copied over. And then now we need to do a range, so just so that we can see it really, a really big range, let's do -45 and 45, just so that we can see kind of how much of a range is being affected and that it's actually being randomized. So let's push enter, and you can see that we get a randomization there. Obviously this is too much, but it could be kind of interesting. We would want to have less of this randomization, and we want to be able to have a little bit of control to maybe give us a seed value or something like that. So let's make a couple attributes and actually connect them to this expression here. Going into parameters, I'm going to create a float. And now that I'm thinking about number of boards, I set it up as a float. So I can get actual like fractions of a board, which doesn't make quite too much sense. Let's switch this over to an integer. So when you change that to an integer, it should only allow whole numbers, which is what we want. That way it's not confusing. It will work either way, but this way is less confusing. Okay, that new parameter we created. Let's do, call this random, rand tilt random or board board random tilt. And then I'm going to create another variable, and then we'll call this board tilt seed random board random tilt seed. There we go. So that way we can get a bit of a range to work with, and we can change some values on this. I want it to basically be able to go from 0 to whatever we want, and as a float that's fine. With the random range for the tilt, what I want to do is set up a range. By default 0 is fine, but I want it to go maybe from -45 to 45 for the minimum and maximum. And let's do accept. Great, so we get this where we can adjust that. So let's connect this board tilt first. I'm going to copy that parameter, and now that I've done that, I'm going to replace that 45 and do paste relative reference. And then I am going to do the same thing here. Going to paste relative reference on the low bound, but I'm going to multiply it by -1. Okay, so now that we're at 0, we see no randomization at all, but as I move it, you'll see that we get some randomization, except for that one. I think that might be the base one that it's using to create it. So the first one's always kind of created that way, and then if we were to add a transform here, that would adjust that one, but that's okay for our uses here. Now the seed is not doing anything. Let's add a seed value. So I'm going to copy this parameter, and here I'm going to multiply by that relative reference inside of the random number. Paste relative reference. There we go. So if we So right now the random seed is just 0 because I have no random seed on there, and whatever the point is multiplied by 0 is going to be that. But if we seed this, you'll see that we'll get different values, and then we can kind of make it more or less intense. So if you just wanted a little bit, and you can kind of play around with the different settings on the seed and maybe make it more intense, and you get a different look. So that's kind of how we can approach that. Okay, So let's create that board, the supports in the back. And before I go too much further, let's save. And I have D drive, CGI Nerd. And let's call this a new folder, and this is going to be fence HDA. HDA is just Houdini Digital Asset. Accept, and then for the file name, I'll name it that's the same thing. Fence HDA .hip. Okay, accept. There we go. Now I am safe. It's always a good idea to save early, save often. Okay, so now that I have that, let's create another box. And on this box here, I'm going to use the height as, or sorry, the width as its height. So let's merge this also, so just so that we can see everything. Boom, boom, boom. Got them connected there. There we go. So we have that box. Now we want to be able to make the width equal to the height of this. So I'm going to copy parameter, and in the Y, I'm going to paste relative reference. There you go. The width, I still want it to be at 0.3. And then sometimes you'll see that it goes into a big number like that. What you can do is go to expressions, toggle expression, and that will bring it back to the 0.3. Okay, so now that I've done that, I want to make sure that the width is the same thing. So I want to take the information from the line, whatever the length of the line is, in case for some reason we change it in the future. I'm going to copy that parameter, and here I am going to paste that on the X. So paste it as a relative reference. And there we go. We got the right width. The only thing is that it's not positioned in the right place, so it's going to be half the distance over. So we've done this before. What we can do is copy that parameter from the size in the X, and we will paste relative reference and multiply that by 0.5. There you go. It's positioned correctly. And now we want to make sure that it is pushed back so that it is not exactly right on top of that. We just want it to be next to it. And in order to do that, that's going to be the Z direction back and forth. So what we can do is copy parameter on the Z for the width, and then in the center for the Z, what we'll do is paste relative reference and multiply that by -1. So it is now positioned where we want it in the back of the panel. Now we just need to be able to adjust the height of this. And also we can connect, yeah, so the width, this will adjust the width. Okay, cool. And then the height, that is, we don't need to control the width on this because it is going to be based off of the line, which we already have. Okay, So the height is the last thing that we need to adjust, which is basically this. But I want to have a second copy of this so that we have two bars going across. So I'm not going to adjust it here, but the way I am going to do it is with a transform node. And I can copy and paste that so that I have another one. And now we'll see if we kind of move one of these that we actually have two when it connects down here. Okay, so let's say, let's look at on this one, maybe 0.3, nope. Where do I want to start off? Maybe, yeah, at 1 looks good. And then the other one I want to bring to the top. So how do I do that? I know what the height is. So let's copy that parameter of the height of the board. Copy parameter. And on here, we're going to, in the Y, paste relative reference. And that will bring it to the top of the board. Now I want to be able to say that from there, because we have it at 1, so let's minus 1, and that will bring it kind of the same spacing from the top as this is from the bottom. Great, so this is good, but it's not going to really change too much, except if we kind of adjust it by the height. But let's say we wanted to bring them closer together or further apart, we need another attribute for that. So let's edit parameters, and we'll call this a float. And we'll say maybe cross board or support spacing, I guess. Support board spacing. Support board spacing. And now that we have that, going to accept. And it will start off here, and as we adjust this, we'll bring it kind of closer together. So I'm going to copy that parameter. And here, I'm going to add minus, paste relative reference. So as I change this, that is going to change that. And then on the other one, here we have it 1, and what we can do is add the relative reference, paste relative reference. There we go. So now as I change these, both of them will move kind of closer and further apart. So that works nicely. We can change all these parameters and everything still works. Can add more boards if we wanted to, adjust the height, make it spikier or less spikier, just all these settings. So this is all working great. Wanted like a little fence. Cool. Now, let's say we wanted to be able to do corners. We can do we can place two of these next to each other and we can do a corner, but let's add functionality to do a rounded corner as well. And then maybe a little bit of tilting on these shapes, just like we did with these boards here. So let's do that first. Let's go in and add a new float. And this is going to be the support board tilt. Support board tilt random. And then going to create another one for a seed as well. Support board seed. Support board random seed. Let's make sure that we have spaces so that way the user can read it easier. There we go. And then on each one of these, basically you want to be able to have a ability to control the rotation, and it's not going to be in that direction, it's going to be in the Z. So we get that. And oops. Okay, and then the center of this move centroid to origin. If we do that, no, that's not what I want. Pivot transform. I want it to be, this was based off of the box. So with the box here, the width here is in the X. Let's copy this parameter. And on the pivot transform on the X, I'm going to paste relative reference and then multiply that by 0.5. And then let's check the rotation now. So we get it kind of from the center. It's a little bit more predictable that way. And I'm going to copy this parameter, and I just did a Control C. And inside of the pivot transform, I'm going to paste that in here as well. So that way on this one, we should get the rotations as well. It's just on the top. Okay, great. So now we need to adjust the rotations, and the port here, I want to be able to get the value here. So it's going to be I fit 0, 1, and then it's going to be a random number, and let's just pick a value, 5, and then comma, and we'll do what we did before, -45, comma, 45, just to make sure it works. There we go. And then as we change this value here, it will give us different values. That is great. And then I just want to make sure that this is different than the other one. So I'm going to keep the value, and then I'll copy this value here and add that +5, so that way it's both the top and the bottom are different. So let's copy relative reference, and then in this fit range I'm going to do right click, paste relative reference, and then we're going to say that we're adding 5 to that. And then here, oops, I messed that up. So let's delete channels here on the board. Delete channels. I put the wrong thing in here. Just get rid of, oops, not that one, on here. Because I'm doing the size, I pasted relative reference over here, which was not what I should have done. Let's take this channel here, get rid of that. Just so that way it's working really quick, and then let's delete channel. It is not wanting to delete. Let's look at expression, toggle expression. Delete channels. Toggle expression again. Let's go to edit expression. I'm not sure why it's not getting rid of it. Delete channels. Okay, so just to get rid of it, I'm going to delete it and rebuild it. So let's go into parameters here, and we will delete this. Let me just copy this so that way I have access to it. So I'm going to just tell it to okay, let's select that and delete. There we go. Just push delete on the keyboard, and then let's add a float. Going to move that up here. Then it is a support board. And then let me get rid of these underscores. There we go. That should be right. There you go. So let's try and copy that parameter one more time. And here in the random value, paste relative reference, and we're just going to add 5. There we go. So now as I change this, it should give us different values. Great. And then now we need to adjust these 45 numbers. So I'm going to copy parameter, and then here I'm going to paste relative reference, and on the first one multiply it by -1 like we did before, -1, and then on the second number delete the 45 and just paste relative reference. There we go. So by default with 0, it's not going to show us much. Let's add a bit more and then some randomness here. And then once we get an angle, we can make it more or less. There we go. Now I'm just going to copy all of this, because for the other board we have here on the other transform, I'm just going to paste all of that there, but I'm going to give it a different number here. Let's say 3. There we go. So now as we change the random tilt, it will be at different values, different seed values, and then we can make it more or less intense here. There we go. So that's how we do that. Now let's go in and add the ability to curve this and make a 90-degree or other variation of distance rotation. In order to do that, we're going to make a bend. And by default, this is not going to work right away. And I'll show you guys why right now. So first off, it's doing it in the wrong direction. So let's make sure that the up direction is 1 in the z for the up vector, but it's the same as the capture direction now. So we're going to make sure that the capture direction is in 1. The capture distance right now is only doing this tiny little bit here, so we want to make sure that we get all the way up to the end, the capture length here, and let's make sure that's connected to the line in case we decide to change that later. So I'm going to copy parameter from the line, and on the bend, here in the capture distance, I'm going to paste relative reference, and that should give us the whole thing. Now let's test out the bend. So it's kind of doing what we want, but we want to also be able to have this curve. The reason it's not curving, the reason this is not curving, like the support bars are not curving properly, is because they don't have enough spans, enough geometry. So we need to make sure that we add that geometry. And in order to do that here, we need to make sure we switch over to polygon mesh. And this kind of works here. We have 4 segments. If we increase this, oops, not on that one, this is going to be 2, it's going to be along the X. So the more we increase this, the smoother it's going to be. But we don't want to have excessive geometry either. What I am going to have an issue with this is if, let's say, I had less boards. If I went to 2, this can kind of be okay, but it actually is not that great. It'd be better if we went down to a connection like that, so it's just kind of connecting it in an angle like that. So what I want to do is actually make the divisions here equal to the number of boards. So let's copy this parameter and let's paste that into the number of divisions. So that way it is going to have an edge for each board. And you'll see that in a moment. Paste relative reference here. Okay, so now as I increase the number of boards, you'll see that the edges appear right where the panels are. So the more boards it is, the more segments it's going to be, but it's going to look natural because each one of these segments between boards is actually straight. So that is pretty cool. And so as I adjust the number of boards, like this looks really natural, and as I smooth it out, it continues to look natural and believable. Great. With the bend, select the bend down here again. I don't want to visualize the colors. Visualize fall off. There we go. That is fine. And now let's add a property here to get the amount of bend that we want. So let's say edit parameter, we'll add another float, and this will be bend fence, bend fence, and I want to set a range from -90 to 90. And they can go more or less if they wanted to at their own peril because it could be kind of weird, but there may be a case where they need to do that. So I'm not going to limit it. Default of 0, that is fine. And then let's accept that. And then I'm going to copy that parameter. And here in the bend, let's paste relative reference. There we go. So the bend is working. It's not updating. So what we can do is go to the merge, maybe go up a few levels, then come back, and that should work now. Sometimes it has a little bit of a glitch with that deformer I've noticed when I create it. But if you go up to change and then come back down, it should fix it. So that way the parameter works fine. And let's save the scene. With all of this, we can revert to factory defaults. Let's see. Revert to defaults. That's okay. Okay. There we have our kind of defaults created for this fence. Let's go back in and make sure that I have something that I'm happy with for all of the defaults. Just kind of a more baseline number. .5. Actually, with the randomness, let's not add any randomness by default. There we go. So this will be the baseline. That's fine. And then peak height, put this at 0. I think that's kind of what we had as our base for our fence. That looks right. Okay. So let's push this that way so that way we can kind of work with this. And we don't need this pinned anymore because I'm just going to work at it at this level now. And now that we have this, I want to bring back some of the other things that I had. What we can do is turn on show invisible. And I'm going to select all of these and uncheck invisible. In order to select them, I selected one, then shift selected the last one on the list, and then I can uncheck that. There we go. So we have all that created, and then I'm going to make sure that the create fence is the first object on the list, so that way, whoa, where did it all go? All of these things, we want to make sure that they're actually in that folder. There we go. So we can apply that, and we can see that now we have the create fence tab, and we have all the other tabs there. So let's look at create fence here. Let's maybe say that these are all the main board. So let's create a folder. And all of these, we're going to put it in side of that folder. Let's name this folder. This is going to be our board shape. Board shape. All right, let's call it settings. There we go. And then on tabs, I can change this. So let's apply to kind of see what we've done here. So we have a tab here, and that might be kind of what you want, but maybe let's try a few other settings. I kind of like that. The simple is just kind of boxing it off to be able to organize it a little bit so that you know that that's what that is. So I'm going to stay with that. And then down here, these are going to be the supports. And here for this, I'm going to switch it over to simple. And this is going to be a support board settings. Support board settings. And I'll apply. So we have that, and this is should be inside of the create fence, so let's make sure it's in there. So now we have the fence bend, which should be its own thing all the way at the bottom. And I'll make sure, yeah. Yeah. So I need to make sure that I have this all the way at the bottom. And let's apply so that it's all the way down there. And I'll call this create another folder. Sorry. And inside of this folder, we'll call it something like fence attributes. And this is not going to be a tab, it's going to be simple. There we go. It's going to be placed inside of the create fence. And the fence bend will be applied there. Apply, accept. So we have all of our fence settings here. Then we have all of our other transforms and stuff on the other tabs. So now we have this cool little tool that we can use to change this fence. Now let's make it into an actual HDA, or a Houdini Digital Asset. How do we do that? We can right click on this fence, tell it that we want to create the digital asset. Operator name, so this is going to be the fence. Having it my name, that's fine. It's just going to create that based off of my name, but let's just do that. That will work. And then we want to choose where we're going to save it. Just for now, I'm going to save it on the desktop here. Actually, let's go into the CGI Nerd, my fence HDA. There we go. And I will accept. And then accept. Destroy all spare parameters, that's fine. And accept. There we go. So this is just kind of a basic overview for a digital asset. So now that I deleted that node, I can actually push tab and go in and create a fence. And I have my fence using the default parameters that we created, and we can make all of the adjustments we need to. We can bend it if we wanted to. All the stuff is still working. Make it pointy. Add more boards. Make it thinner. Less tilted. Oops. That's the seed. There we go. So that is pretty much. So that's it for the how to create this fence digital asset, introduction to creating a digital asset. I hope you found this useful. It's procedural modeling, kind of fun. It does, I mean, to make this honestly by hand would be pretty quick, but when we have this tool, if we have to make hundreds or thousands of these all throughout a scene or within a video game or something like that, it makes it really quick and fast, because if I need another variation, all I need to do is create tab and create a fence. Boop, done. Then I can create another one, fence, and let's move this so we can see that we have another one, and we can rotate it if we wanted to, and do whatever we needed to with the fence, and lay out a whole bunch of them if we needed to and whatnot. So that is what we have done here, created the digital asset to make our production life easier. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.